Brothers and sisters, morning. It's a pleasure to be with all of you again. A couple of days back, I was invited to speak to a group of students who were preparing for the board exams. And I was asked to share a few tips that could make them a little more productive. Now I said, okay, they don't have much time. Exams are just around the corner. So let me share with them some practical, easy to implement, and yet impactful NEUROHACKS that can make a difference. And we had a great time sharing these NEUROHACKS with them. So I thought I'll share them with you today. The first thing that I want to talk about is a study conducted by Stanford University. Okay, and it talks about metacognition. It's a 15 minutes NEUROHACK, which can make an amazing difference in the results that you get. Now, metacognition is thinking about the way you think. Okay. Now, what we have found is that a lot of students jump into exam preparations mindlessly. Okay, without really having a strategy to approach it. So all you need to do is take a sheet of paper, okay, and try to answer these questions. Question number 1, okay, what grade do you expect to get in this examination? It's extremely important to come up with an answer, okay. Number 2, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for you to get this grade? Now, once you've come up with an answer, say you've come up with 8, ask yourself, why not 9, okay, and try to come up with an answer. And the third question is, how likely are you to get this grade? Again, on a scale from 1 to 10. Now, this takes probably 30 seconds of your time. And now comes the tough one, okay? Question number 4. Here, you ask yourself, what do you think are the most important areas that are going to come in the examination? What do you think are the most important types of questions that could come? Now, it's obvious you won't have an answer right away for this question, so you'll have to do some research. You'll have to probably look at previous question papers. You'll have to speak to your teachers. You'll have to speak to your peers. But then make sure that you have a list of identified areas and questions which are extremely important and which will most probably come for the examination. Then comes another extremely important part where you say, okay, now I've got a lot of resources to study from. I can study from my text, I can study from my class notes, I can discuss with peers, I can go and meet my teacher, I can even avail private tutoring. So what is the right, most effective strategy to learn these most important questions? Okay, so it's just these 4 or 5 questions. It's part of your metacognition process, and studies show that just by doing this, being mindful of what's going to appear in the examinations, the grade that I want to score, how likely am I to score it, will tremendously improve your chances of performing well. Okay. Now the second strategy. Now this is very practical. This is extremely doable. Something that you can start implementing right away. Now, before I talk about the strategy, let me talk about the DNA of top performance. Now, if you have to perform well, okay, if you have to pay attention well, if you have to remember well, you have to have a cocktail of chemicals in your brain. We call it the DNA of top performance. Okay. First is dopamine, which is a chemical that is secreted when you feel good. Noradrenaline, which is a chemical that is secreted when you feel challenged, okay, and acetylcholine, again, when you feel challenged, it helps you to focus, okay. It helps you to keep distractions away. Now, how do you make sure that you have the DNA of top performance, the cocktail of top performance in your brain when you study? Step number 1, okay, before you start learning a chapter, do a pre-test. What do you mean by a pre-test? Okay, so go to the last part of the chapter and try answering the questions there. So now you might ask me, well, I haven't learned the chapter, so how do I answer the questions? That is exactly the point. Now, when you try answering these questions, try to come up with answers. Sometimes you might remember something that was taught in class. Sometimes it could be from common sense, okay? But when you try answering these questions, your answers may be wrong, but what you're doing is you're creating hooks in your brain, okay? Which later when you study the contents, it quite easily goes and attaches itself to these hooks. Plus, by challenging yourself even before you start learning, you get a noradrenaline rush in your brain. So that's the number 1 chemical. Okay, you already have that in place. Number 2, choose just 2 or 3 pages, okay? Something that's stupid simple. We call it stupid simple, 2 or 3 pages. Now ask yourself, how much time am I going to take to learn these 2 to 3 pages? If your mind answers back 20 minutes, then set a target for yourself which is less than that time. Let's say 15 minutes. Once again, the objective is to challenge yourself to get a noradrenaline rush. Okay, so you've got 2 to 3 chapters, 2 to 3 pages, you've done a pre-test and you've set a time for yourself, okay, to learn it. Now, when you start learning it, one extremely effective way is you've gone through a particular problem or a derivation or a formula or a conversion. Try explaining it yourself, okay, as if you're trying to teach yourself. Yeah, so you take a sheet of paper out, try to draw the formula out, the derivation out, the way you solve the problem, and explain it to yourself while you do it. Now, when you do this, this is extremely important, brothers and sisters. When you do this, you're attaching new meaning to it from things that you already know. Now, this is an extremely good strategy to push that learning into your long-term memory. Okay. Now, once you've learned those two to 3 chapters, this stupid, simple volume of content, extremely important, post-test yourself. This is extremely, extremely important. What you do is probably close the content with your hand and try to answer it yourself. Try to answer questions from the back of the chapter. Okay, but you have to test yourself. Okay, what people usually do, it's called mass practice. They keep learning the content again and again and again, but this creates an illusion of learning without pushing the content into your long-term memory. But when you actually test yourself, what happens is what has been put into your memory is brought back into your working memory, and then you try answering the questions. A new meaning gets connected to the content, and then it gets pushed back into your long-term memory, and it gets fortified. So please test yourself, okay? You might get everything right, or you might get 80% right. Now, once you test yourself, okay, make sure that the content is stupid simple, just 2 to 3 pages. Make sure that you've looked at the clock, okay? So you've got the noradrenaline rush. Okay, and the second chemical is acetylcholine. Okay, again, when you feel challenged, when you do something important, acetylcholine helps you to keep your distractions away. So you've got that running right in your brain right now, helping you study. Now, once you've posted yourself and you've answered the questions right, you have to celebrate. Now, how do you celebrate? You can celebrate by saying yes. You can celebrate by probably standing up and dancing around. You can celebrate by saying, wow, I've done it. You can celebrate by patting yourself on the back. You have to celebrate, because the feeling of having done it well and the celebration can lead to a dopamine rush in your brain. So you get the DNA of performance. Make sure that you celebrate, stand up and say, yippee, I've done it. Okay, before moving on to the next stupid, simple volume of content. So once you've done that, okay, automatically we call it self-efficacy, because you start feeling that, oh, this is easy, I can do it. Because number one, stupid simple, you've pre-tested yourself, you've post-tested yourself, and you've exalted. Okay, so self-efficacy creates success momentum, and then when you start working on the next few sheets, your brain is much more poised to understand, to retain, and to keep distractions away. Now, the last point that I want to talk in the same chapter, in the same topic, is students tend to say, okay, I have 3 days for chemistry, I have 4 days for biology. Please don't do that. Okay, the right strategy is to do interleaved practice. So one day you learn biology, the next day you learn chemistry. So you have new content coming in. Every time the content is new, your brain gets interested. Okay, and you get a dopamine rush. So this is like comparing a textbook with your social media feed. Something new, okay, and something exciting. Please, and another way of getting the dopamine is even shift the place you learn. Okay, so in the morning you learn from your room, then you go to the living room, go to another place, and also change the way you practice. Okay, so first you try answering exam questions. Second, you could call your peer up and say, I'll quiz you, and you quiz me back. Or you can ask your parents to quiz you, or you can mask the content in the text and ask questions yourself. So try these different ways of practicing. Okay, so if I may summarize, number one, metacognition. So ask those questions, yeah, to yourself. What grades I want to get? How likely am I going to get it? How important is it for me to get it? The most common or important questions that come in the examination, and the right way to learn it. So you have a strategy, you don't jump mindlessly. Number two, do a pre-test. Choose stupid, simple content, 2 to 3 pages, put an aggressive time target for it, okay, and while you're studying, explain it to yourself, do a post-test, and once you've done a post-test, exult, celebrate, so you get this dopamine rush in your brain, and then make sure that you do interleaved practice, okay, a little bit of physics and then a couple of hours of chemistry, and take it forward. Now, these are practical and simple neuro hacks that can really support you, research proven strategies to help you perform better. So all the best for your exams, do well, and make us all proud.